Um, Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Cressy. I'm the co-founder and principal consultant at Raise Heck. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Life After Luminate CRM, Planning for a Bright Future. I'm joined today by my colleague and partner in business, Sally Heaven.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Sally Heaven, and it is indeed heavenly to be here with you today. Like Charlotte told you, I'm the other half of Raise Heck, and I'm also thrilled to be with you today, as well as our very good friend, Watt. Over to you, Watt.
Hey, so this is Watt Hamlett. I'm the founder and principal of Watt Hamlett Consulting. So thrilled to be with Sally and Charlotte today and with all of you.
So we're going to spend a little bit of time, actually a lot, just kidding, talking about who we are and what makes us qualified to speak to you about this topic. Then we're going to spend some time talking about what the heck is Luminate CRM. So we'll level set on what it is and what it does and how it relates to Luminate Online. Then we're going to spend some time talking about your options and what types of alternatives exist both within and beyond the Salesforce platform. And we break this down into 4 distinct pathways for your consideration. We will also discuss and outline a technology-agnostic process and recommended next steps for finding and migrating to a new solution before June 30th, 2022. We've also blocked time at the end for question and answer, but if you have a question throughout, just put it in the chat and one of us will either try and answer or address it at the end when we've left some time. So let's get moving and find out all about who we are. So about Raise Heck, we'll start with us. So Sally and I have been working together in varying capacities for about 15 years. First, Sally was my customer success manager when I was a client using Convio. Then we were colleagues and we worked together in customer success at Blackbaud, where we worked primarily with Luminate Online and Luminate CRM customers. So we may have had the opportunity to work together with some of you. Finally, Sally and I decided to start Raise Heck in September 2019. And our goal has really been to help nonprofits use their technology better or find a solution that better fits their needs. We focus heavily on change management and user adoption. And as a bonus, Sally's puns are included in everything that we do.
All right, and let me tell you a little bit about me. So I work with nonprofits in an advisory capacity to help them make decisions related to Salesforce through the services that you see here on the screen. This could be for nonprofits who are planning to move to Salesforce for the first time and need an experienced guide to help them navigate that process, or for nonprofits who are already using Salesforce and are either having some issues that they could use some external help to sort through, or maybe things are going great and they could use some help in planning for the future on Salesforce. Or they could be using a Salesforce app like Luminate CRM that is being discontinued, and they could use some help in sorting through the alternatives. So how is that for a segue? So we wanted to start by giving you some background that we think will be helpful, both in terms of Luminate CRM and Salesforce, that can help shine some light on what this announcement from Blackbaud means, as well as where you can go from here with your nonprofit's technology. And both Charlotte and Sally have lots of experience working with clients who use Luminate CRM. I do as well. I was a solution engineer for Luminate CRM when it was first introduced. I worked with many of the first nonprofits who adopted it, both at Convio and then later with the Salesforce partner ACF Solutions, where I was a solution architect for 6 years. So let's hop into the Wayback Machine, and we're going to set the dial to 1999. The Sixth Sense was topping the box office. Cher was topping the charts, asking if we believed in life after love in a very auto-tuned voice. And 2 software companies were born that year in the cloud: Salesforce and Convio. So Salesforce was founded by Mark Benioff. It was the first software as a service CRM. It was designed for businesses to help them manage their customers and their sales to those customers. And both the product and the company were called Salesforce. At the same time that he launched Salesforce, he also launched the Salesforce Foundation, which was initially called, some fun trivia here, Benioff's Promise. And that was a way to demonstrate that this software company, Salesforce, had an intention to be philanthropic, both with their products and with their time as the company grew. So that same year, Convio was started by Vinay Bhagat. The vision there was to create an online service that nonprofits could use for engaging with their constituents, for fundraising, and for email marketing. And like Salesforce, both the company and the product were called Convio. So fast forward to 2006, Salesforce created the App Exchange, which provided a way for other businesses to build products that ran on Salesforce. And that sounded like an interesting idea to the folks at Convio. So 2 years later, they became the first company to build a fundraising database built on the Salesforce platform and available on the App Exchange. And that product was named Convio Common Ground. So the Salesforce platform was a huge advantage to Convio in doing this, because rather than having to create a product from scratch, it could take advantage of everything that Salesforce already provided: logins and license management, core data model, reports, workflow, et cetera. And so Convio Common Ground was able to quickly go head to head against existing products in the nonprofit space. And so this is really where Convio's story becomes part of the Salesforce story. Now, around the same time, there was also a community-driven effort happening in the Salesforce world to find ways to make Salesforce work more like a donor database. And so that led to the creation of the Nonprofit Starter Pack, or NPSP, which was introduced and made freely available to nonprofits starting in 2009. After releasing Common Ground, Convio had a problem. In fact, Convio had two problems. The first problem was with its name. Now that it had a product that was called Common Ground, what should it do about this product that was just called Convio? And so that's when the product called Convio got rebranded to Convio Online Marketing, or COM. The other problem that Convio faced with Common Ground was that it was starting to attract the attention of large nonprofits, but it wasn't really that well suited for large nonprofits. So a decision was made to fork the code. So there would now be Common Ground Original, which would be for smaller nonprofits, and then an enterprise version of Common Ground for larger nonprofits that would be called Common Ground Enterprise. And that version of Common Ground was designed to work hand in hand with Convio Online Marketing, so that with kind of a single solution stack, nonprofits would have a CRM for all of their constituent management, as well as a set of online tools for driving online engagement. Then in 2011, Common Ground Enterprise plus Convio Online Marketing were rebranded as Convio Luminate. So Luminate was a combination of Luminate CRM, which was the old Common Ground Enterprise, and then Convio Online Marketing, which was now called Luminate Online. Okay, so that's sort of how we got to this thing called Luminate. Then in 2012, Blackbaud acquired Convio, and so that's when everything got rebranded again to be Blackbaud Luminate CRM and Blackbaud Luminate Online. Shortly thereafter, Blackbaud announced that it would be discontinuing Common Ground. And then that was followed by a number of years of really focused effort at Salesforce to more and more address the needs of nonprofits. So in 2016, Nonprofit Starter Pack was rebranded to Nonprofit Success Pack. In 2018, the Nonprofit Cloud was introduced. So this now puts Salesforce's offerings for nonprofits on par with its other clouds, with Sales Cloud and Service Cloud and Community Cloud. It also offered for the first time the opportunity for there to be a certification that consultants and nonprofit staff could earn around using Nonprofit Cloud. And then in 2020, so just last year, Salesforce.org released its first paid products into the market. In fact, released five paid products just last year. And then that was followed by earlier this year, Blackbaud announcing that it would discontinue Luminate CRM as of June 30th, 2022. So hopefully that was a fun journey down memory lane, or maybe introducing you to some things you didn't know. But the big picture, as I see it, is that over the past 9 years or so, Blackbaud has been slowly divesting itself of its Salesforce-based solutions, while at the same time, Salesforce has been expanding its offerings for nonprofits. So while it's no doubt going to be disruptive to any organization that's using Luminate CRM and is going to have to find an alternative, I think the silver lining in the cloud here, if you will, is that today there are much better options available both directly from Salesforce for nonprofits who need to make that change, as well as from other third-party vendors who offer comparable solutions. And we're gonna kind of talk through some of those options here in just a bit. But first, let's talk about what LCRM actually is from a technology perspective, and then what it's going to mean for organizations once it's no longer available. So as I noted earlier, there are actually two different products that have the name Luminate. And the first is Luminate Online. So this is the product, again, that was originally called Convio, and then Com, and then CLO, and now just Luminate Online. And it's a standalone platform for online fundraising, advocacy, email marketing, events, e-commerce, and team fundraising. Plus it has its own built-in database called Constituent 360. The important thing to know about this is that this is not going away. Blackbaud has made no announcement yet regarding the future of Luminate Online. So if you have Luminate Online, you will be able to continue to use it even once Luminate CRM goes away. All right, so that's kind of the first important thing to know about the solution. The second is that in order to have Luminate CRM, you first have to have Salesforce. If your organization is on LCRM, you have Salesforce. And every organization and for-profit entity that has Salesforce all have certain things in common. They get a core set of data tables that are called objects for things like accounts and contacts and opportunities and campaigns. There are a bunch of other standard objects that come with the Salesforce platform. There's a set of standard reports that come with Salesforce and a report writer tool. There's extensive workflow within Salesforce, so the ability to build out things like notifications, or if data changes in one table, update it in another table. And then there's also the ability to add in other apps into your Salesforce org. So for things like document generation or electronic signatures or wealth screening, those are add-ins that can be added on to the Salesforce platform by any Salesforce customer. And so this is where Luminate CRM comes in, because Luminate CRM is one of those third-party apps. So as you see from my diagram here, it installs on top of Salesforce and adds in its own set of custom objects and its own custom functionality. And we'll talk more about specifically what that is in just a second. But if you notice, thanks to my sweet Google Slides skills here, I made this box translucent. And that's to show that not only does Luminate CRM install its own unique things, but it also puts roots down into lots of other areas of Salesforce. So it modifies or enhances or otherwise interacts with these standard objects, accounts and contacts and opportunities and campaigns. It installs its own reports. It modifies workflow rules and so forth, even putting roots into other apps within your Salesforce org. So there's another component that you have when you have both Luminate CRM and Luminate Online, and that is Luminate integration. So it's represented here by this green arrow. This is also known as the service bus, so you may hear that terminology as well. This is a piece of Blackbaud technology that handles the exchange of data between Salesforce and Luminate CRM and Luminate Online. And then to kind of flesh out the picture here, so these two systems almost all the time sit alongside other systems within a nonprofit organization. Things like accounting systems, data warehouse, maybe a lockbox for offline transaction processing, your website, and so forth. And so you probably, if you have those other systems, you probably have some kind of data exchange happening between those systems and Salesforce and Luminate CRM. It could be just a manual exchange of files, or there could be some more automated things happening as part of that data exchange. So again, what we have here is a representative picture of what the system environment looks like when you have Luminate CRM and possibly Luminate Online. So we're going to go from here to take a look at what's under the hood in Luminate CRM. And this is what you have, this picture here, this is what you have in your Salesforce org when you have Luminate CRM. There are about 66 data tables or custom objects that get installed with Luminate CRM. Luminate CRM also interacts, as I mentioned, with these 4 standard objects within Salesforce. And these tables are all, additional tables are all in service of helping Salesforce function more like a donor database. So you've got a set of tables related to your constituents for things like salutations, classifications, relationships, or multiple addresses. At a donation level, you've got tables for things like designations, premiums and pledges, recurring gifts and tributes. And then for fundraising, there's a set of tables for things like efforts and packages for direct mail solicitations, source code management. And then Luminate CRM also has tables to support event-related data, volunteer-related data, and then a set of tables for data related to Luminate Online's TeamRaiser functionality. So that's all that comes with Luminate CRM from a data level. And then here on the right, you see some of the custom functionality that installs with Luminate CRM. So you get, as I mentioned, you get reports and workflow that come with Luminate CRM. There's an interface for batch gift entry that's also tied to Luminate Online for the purpose of credit card processing inside of your batches. There's a GL export utility for batching up records to be sent over to your accounting system. There's a source code builder that will let you construct source codes for your direct response solicitations. There's a drag and drop list builder that lets you combine data from both LCRM and Luminate Online to build audience segments for your marketing and fundraising. There's also a utility called Luminate Analytics that lets you do reporting and dashboarding beyond what standard Salesforce reports can offer, again, across a combined data set of Luminate Online and Luminate CRM. And then the last piece here is multi-center. So this is what enables organizations to support multiple chapters or multiple affiliates of their organizations inside a single instance of Salesforce. So there's a lot on this slide. Sort of fix it in your mind for just a moment. And then let's go back to our full solution environment. And let's start talking about what happens when Luminate CRM goes away. So the first thing is that everything that we just saw on that previous slide goes away as of June 30th, 2022. And then, as I've discussed, because of the roots that LCRM puts into other things within your Salesforce org, those are going to be affected as well. That's why I have a little worried face emoji across all these different areas. So you'll need to do some due diligence to understand exactly Luminate's footprint across all these, Luminate CRM's footprint across all these other areas, and then how you're going to compensate for that going forward. So for example, let's say you're using Conga, the app Conga, for receipt generation. The fields that you use in your merge template in Conga are very likely Luminate CRM fields, things like the campaign name and the designation and the pledge amount. Those fields will no longer be in your Salesforce org. So that template, that receipt template, is no longer going to work. The same is true for other apps, like if you're using something for wealth screening, it's very likely that that wealth screening app is writing into Luminate CRM specific fields. Notice you will still have Salesforce, and to the extent that in your organization you have users who use Salesforce but not Luminate CRM, in theory, they should continue to be able to use the system as is. However, that's something, again, you'll really need to validate and test out to be sure that there aren't any unintended impacts of removing Luminate CRM for your other Salesforce users. Also, when Luminate CRM goes away, the Luminate integration goes away. So my green arrow has faded out. There will no longer be a connection between Salesforce and Luminate Online. So that's something that you'll need to account for if you're planning to keep both Luminate and Salesforce, or Luminate Online and Salesforce. And then finally, any of the data exchange processes that you have in place with your other nonprofit systems are going to potentially be affected. For sure, any data exchange with your accounting system is going to be affected because no doubt that's drawing from Luminate CRM related data inside of Salesforce. And so again, this is something that you're going to have to attend to once Luminate CRM is no longer available. So if you were to do nothing, this is what you would be left with as of June 30th, 2022. But of course, we know you're not going to do nothing because that's why you're on this webinar. So let's talk about now, what are your options to deal with this situation?
What are your options? And, or as we like to say with our own shorthand, OMG, this is happening. What are you going to do? So that's what we're going to talk you through. The first thing to know is Watt and Charlotte have both mentioned the date June 30th, 2022, which is the announced end of life date for Luminate CRM. So that is the date to plan for, and it is May 20th today, and that means it's a year and maybe a smattering of a few days. So we've got to get going on this. We don't have a lot of time to go through the stages of denial, anger, and grief. Let's experience them, but on an accelerated timeline. And then let's get busy figuring things out. Another thing that you're going to want to consider, and Watt has alluded to this a little bit, but the more that you are using Salesforce for, and originally Watt told us that Common Ground in its first conception was conceived as a donor database for smaller organizations, but I think a lot of organizations quickly saw the potential of Salesforce to apply to their entire organization, and certainly Luminate CRM was designed as an organizational CRM. So many organizations are using it for more than just fundraising and as more than just a donor database. They might be using it for program management and mission delivery. Many other departments or even chapters might be using it for specific use cases. So if you have a large footprint on Salesforce, then, and this refers both to like your total amount of data, but also what you're doing with it, then the more of a heavy lift that this is going to be. Because of that, we are big fans of keeping it simple and not overcomplicating things, especially given that we've got 1 year, 1 month, and some number of days to go. So we're going to guide you through how you consider what's simple and what's complicated. We'll talk about that a little bit. And the last thing that we want to, recommend to you is if you need help, ask for help. If you've got this, no problem. Go for it, go forth and evaluate your options and get her done. But if you need someone to help you evaluate, should I stay on Salesforce or not? Is Luminate Online where I want to stay or not? What other considerations do I have? Then, ask people who specialize in this. Our friend Watt is, as he's told you, perhaps a bit too modestly, he's an expert in Salesforce and he can answer questions. Charlotte and I, would love to help you consider solutions if you need help for something that isn't on Salesforce. But it's not just the three of us. There's an entire world out there, ecosystem of consultants who are totally awesome, who do this kind of help and assessment and all the time. And, if it's not us, someone else is out there and they will want to help you. So, so don't hesitate. That's the first and the last thing. So next, what are your options? Like, there are 4 of them. 2 of them involve staying on Salesforce, and 2 of them involve staying with Luminate Online. And then there are combinations and permutations of this combination. So, I think like we will need to figure out and see it visually to evaluate what we're doing here. So here's this helpful mnemonic. If it's blue, it's Salesforce. If it's green, it's Luminate Online. If it's a beautiful dusky teal, that means that you will keep both of them. And if you decide after you go through this process that you don't want to stay on either of them, that's what we've represented here by this wide open blank space. And we will go into the unknown, but it won't be scary. We're going to dig into what each of these 4 options represents for you. And so we're going to start with staying on Salesforce, and Watt is going to speak to that.
So if you decide or you want to investigate staying on Salesforce, that's going to be the right choice for you when you use Salesforce for more than just fundraising, or you have plans to use it for more than just fundraising, and when in PSP or the alternatives on the Salesforce platform, plus any add-ons, are going to affordably meet your needs and cover all your bases. So there's functional considerations to staying on Salesforce, as well as budgetary considerations. Staying on Salesforce is potentially your most efficient approach, because again, that core that you're already used to working with remains, and therefore the user interface will be largely the same. So it's going to have the least amount of impact on your users compared to adopting a completely different CRM. It is, as we talked about, going to require you to replace all of the things that Luminate CRM installed that are relevant to you. And maybe not everything that Luminate had and did is relevant to you. So again, part of the process will be sorting through that. NPSP is likely going to be your best alternative to making up for the gap that LCRM leaves behind. There are still a couple of paid apps out there that are possible alternatives to LCRM, AffiniQuest, and CauseView. So if you like that model of having a vendor and a formal application, those may be things you want to look at. But just know from a functional perspective, NPSP will get you most of the way where you need to be today. It has a household data model. It supports multiple addresses. It has objects for recurring giving and soft credits and designations and payments. It also comes with its own set of reports and workflow rules. It has functionality for batch gift entry now, so you can close that gap with Luminate CRM. And there's also now a paid option for data exchange with your accounting system. It doesn't cover all the functionality though, so you will need to supplement it with add-ons, specifically for volunteers, for events. If you've been using Luminate Analytics for advanced analytics, you'll need an option for that. Also, just like the source code builder, the list builder, and there are offerings from Salesforce itself or from other third parties that cover most of those categories. Also, as we discussed, you're going to need to validate all of your integrations to understand what impact Luminate CRM being removed is going to have. And I guess the important thing to know there is that at a technical level, those integrations with LCRM are with Salesforce. So there shouldn't be any technical barriers to continuing those integrations, but you just may need to reconfigure them for them to keep working. And then you're going to have to treat this like a new Salesforce deployment. I know that is not the most welcome news, but it really is the truth. And so the first step in that is going to be planning. You're going to have to build a project plan. You'll need to do the work to create the gap analysis between how you use LCRM and how you need to use Salesforce without it, and then sort through all of the different options, and including selecting an implementation partner. And as I mentioned at the top, this is work that I do, so it's something I can help you with through the planning part of the project. And then you'll need to turn your attention to an implementation. There are pros and cons to implementing these alternatives inside of the Salesforce org you're already using versus standing up a brand new Salesforce org and building out everything there. And those are things that your consulting or implementation partner can help you sort through and make decisions about. And then you're going to need good support. So yes, you'll still be in Salesforce, but the tools inside of that will be different. And so you can't neglect the impact that's going to have on your users and the importance of getting everybody up to speed and comfortable in using the new parts of the system. And so for that reason, you will need to engage with a qualified Salesforce partner. Now, there are lots of them to choose from. There are over 100 firms in the US now who focus on Salesforce implementations for nonprofits. I conducted a survey of about 35 of them ahead of this webinar, just based on my knowledge of the ecosystem, to find out which ones had prior experience either implementing LCRM or migrating organizations from it, and or who had the capacity and the willingness to take on this work over the next year. And I heard back from 20 of them, and so that's the list that's on the slide here. There's, or at least half of them. I'll show you the other half in just a moment. These are sorted, first of all, based on the number of prior LCRM projects that the firm has done, and then alphabetically within that. And then you'll also see the size of nonprofit that these firms are best equipped to support, and the legend for that is over here. Now, I do want to just say that this is not by any means exhaustive of your options for partners, and also just to say that this is all self-reported data, so I had no way to validate this. This is just what the partners that I reached out to told me. But as you can see, there are a number here who have done more than 10 Salesforce implementations related to LCRM. Again, either directly implementing it at some point in the past or migrating organizations off of it more recently. The next set of partners have done this 5 to 9 times. And then the final set here have all done, anywhere from 1 to 4. There's a few who haven't done any, but who are interested in taking on that work. And all but 2 of the firms, in fact, just all but the last 2 here, have someone on their staff who has prior experience with LCRM, which is an important factor for them to be able to, to have the expertise needed to do this work. So, this list can be a great place for you to start from. The other thing I'll say is that if you are going to replace Luminate Online and you're looking at one of Salesforce's solutions, either Marketing Cloud or Pardot, you will want to validate that the partner you select also has the right level of expertise with both of those systems. In general, as you're looking for a Salesforce partner, I encourage you to check out this resource on my website. It's a 10-part series that I recently published that takes you through the whole process of understanding Salesforce consulting partners and then going through the process of finding and contracting with one. And again, that's also a service that I provide my clients. So if you need some help in kind of navigating that and running that process, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, so that's some thoughts about just generally staying on Salesforce. And then there's this question of, if you stay on Salesforce, whether or not you should keep Luminate Online. So let's talk about the situation of deciding to keep it. And that's going to be best when, obviously, if Luminate Online is still meeting your needs, that's wonderful. There's no need for you to change. Or let's say Luminate Online maybe isn't your ideal anymore, but given the timeline, you don't really have time to do both a Luminate CRM replacement and a Luminate Online replacement. And again, as Sally alluded to, the bigger your organization, kind of the bigger your footprint on Salesforce, the heavier lift this whole project's going to be. And so that could be a consideration for staying on Luminate Online for now. Again, it'll be more efficient. You're only replacing one system instead of two, and you won't be making any changes to either the staff-facing functions of Luminate Online or the constituent-facing functions. You will still need to build some new Salesforce objects in order to accommodate any kind of data exchange with Luminate Online, and you'll have to replace the integration between Salesforce and Luminate Online. But again, that's something that your Salesforce selected Salesforce partner will be able to help you with. And then what about replacing Luminate Online? So sort of the opposite of what I just said. So if it's not working for you, and time is on your side. So if you're kind of on the simpler side of what you're doing with LCRM, and maybe you're not using Luminate Online for much more than just say basic online fundraising, that could be a possible alternative for you. Now, what if you decide that you are going to replace Luminate Online but keep Salesforce? I do just want to highlight that Salesforce itself now directly offers a couple of solutions that can be alternatives to Luminate Online. So for email marketing, as I mentioned, Salesforce sells Marketing Cloud and Pardot for that. For online fundraising, Salesforce.org last year introduced Elevate. It is essentially a version 1 product. It is not as full featured as Luminate Online's online fundraising is today. But again, if your needs are pretty basic, it could be a reasonable alternative. And then there's also a part of Luminate Online called the Gift Service Center for letting your constituents do things like, update their mailing address or manage their recurring gift. If you wanted to do that just with Salesforce, there is the Salesforce Experience Cloud. It used to be called Community Cloud. It would be a custom bill that your partner would have to do for you. But it may be an alternative that you hear your partner or you hear Salesforce recommend. So just wanted you to be aware of sort of where that fits. But then beyond that, Salesforce itself doesn't offer any alternatives to advocacy, TeamRaiser, events, or e-commerce. So if those are pieces of Luminate Online that you're using and you were planning to replace Luminate Online, you will have to find alternatives for those.
All right. So part of my personal brand is speaking in a Zoom before unmuting myself, and I'm glad that we could remain consistent. Now I'm going to speak to, well, what happens if you've decided to leave Salesforce and to keep Luminate Online? So we're moving into the bottom part of that square that we presented to you. Who fits into this category? We already talked a little bit about this, but if you only use Salesforce for fundraising, and if you would describe your use of it as being more of, it's a donor database rather than an organizational CRM, that could be one factor for why you place yourself in this category. Another consideration is if you've ever wondered, I feel like we're not using all of the features of this platform that our database is on, and do we need all this? Is it too much? Then that might be another reason why you choose to move off of Salesforce. And like Watt said, if Luminate Online is meeting your needs and you are getting great results with it, it is a powerful tool. We also think, this goes back to keeping it simple, there is value in not introducing too much change all at once. So minimizing change is a consideration. Like Watt said, and we've talked about, data integration is something to consider. And if the new CRM that you choose to replace Luminate Online is not a Blackbaud product, then you will need data integration as part of the solution that you choose, data integration to Luminate Online. This is actually a good time, I think, for us to mention, if you haven't yet spoken to Blackbaud about the Luminate CRM end of life, then you should call them. They have other CRM products. Give them a call and see if you can talk to them about whether one of the other ones would be a good fit for you. And if it is, then you may not have to worry as much about the data integration piece. So that's that. Now, let's consider what happens if you decide to replace both Luminate Online and leave Salesforce. So in this scenario, you are going to be replacing two systems at once. And again, who fits into this category well? You know, if you're only using Salesforce for fundraising and it's more than you need, and then if Luminate Online isn't meeting your needs, or in some cases, if it's actually more than you need, then you may be a candidate for this category. So again, change management and considerations for the people this is going to affect. You're going to be replacing two important systems at once. And in the former scenario, or even in this scenario, replacing a tool that's used primarily as a donor database is a lot of change in and of itself. That certainly affects the development and fundraising teams. And digital tools, when you throw those into the mix, they may be used by even more additional teams. So there are a lot of people to consider if this is the path that you are going to be on. Another thing to think about in advance is, does your organization have a preferred technology arrangement? So your IT department may describe this as, you know, what kind of stack do you have? And the way that we like to think of it is you can have multiple solutions that do one or a small slice of things very well, or you might have one system that does everything. And I've described those as two sort of like extremes, but it's not binary. It's not either or. It's actually more of a continuum. At one end of the continuum, you might actually have tons of different tools that don't talk to each other at all. And then someone at your organization, maybe in your IT department, is responsible for taking all that data and integrating it into a central system like a data warehouse or something else like that. And then at the other extreme, you know, you only have one system and it does everything, and it does everything perfectly. But along that continuum, there's actually a range of this sort of arrangement. A lot of different systems have built integrations to other systems that are, I would say, like market leaders, or if they find that their two companies work well together, then maybe they have built and maintain and support integrations to the other systems. And so you can consider them part of the product. Or maybe they're a service that they provide, but it's something that you can count on. And we are going to talk about that more in a moment. The last thing I'll just say about this scenario is, if you've ever been through a process, an RFP process, then you have probably talked a lot about like your requirements. What are my requirements? What do I want? You may have even participated in filling them all out on a very large grid system and getting very detailed. And I think Charlotte and I, for sure, and maybe some of you too, we've moved more to talking about use cases and needs, wants, and nice to have. So, you know, I may say the word requirements on the next slide, but I really will be speaking more about use cases. What are you actually doing with all of these systems? And how do you get there? What is our recommended process? I will say the first step is, don't get paralyzed, you know, by the things that you have to do. Instead, you can ask yourself some key questions. The reason why we've put these 3 and then 2, which adds up to 5, but they're you know, different flavors of questions, is that you will need to know the answers to these questions to inform your decision and make the best decision that you can. So before we talked about key principles, now we're talking about key questions. Do you have a large and complex direct mail program, or do you have plans to grow and complexify your existing program? So if so, you'll need to know that, because whatever you choose will need to be able to accommodate it. Watt also mentioned TeamRaiser, which is a module of Luminate Online. And so it's a peer-to-peer fundraising tool that allows for teams and captains and participants, as well as a number of other implementations of that system. And so if that is a core part of the fundraising that your organization does, you will need to find something like that if you're not planning on keeping Luminate Online or keeping TeamRaiser. Similarly, this topic is near and dear to my heart because of where I started in the nonprofit space. It was in advocacy and online advocacy. So if advocacy is a core part of your program, then you need to have something there to support it. It's one of the things that Luminate Online does well. And if you move off of Luminate Online, then you must consider how you're going to get your advocacy done. And then there are two housekeeping things that are really important that you've got to know. When do your current Salesforce licenses expire? And when does your Luminate Online contract expire? And here's the thing, you need to know that for the date. You also need to read those contracts so you know what your obligations are to notify the companies who issued them. And if you can't find them, maybe you didn't, maybe you weren't working at the organization when these solutions came around, then go look for them ASAP. And if you truly can't find them, call the companies and they'll have a copy. They can help you out. All right, so how are we going to get there? So step one, somebody needs to be in charge, the migration project lead. And, you know, we sometimes say that co-chair means no chair. Somebody needs to sort of conduct the train. And an inclusive process is very good, and sometimes two do it, but that just introduces an opportunity for things to fall through the cracks. So we do recommend, you know, someone is in charge. It doesn't mean they have to do everything, but it does mean that they have to move the process along. The second thing is don't do it alone. Lots of people are going to be affected by this change. So you want to recruit them, not only to get their input, but so they can help you too. The third thing is inventory your use cases and figure out what are you actually doing with your current systems, Luminate CRM and Salesforce and Luminate Online. And then is there anything else that you are using that maybe you acquired in the last few years to augment the functions of these systems? Is there a chance to consolidate the functions of those systems? All right. The other thing is, if you're going to buy something new, you've got to pay for it. So, you know, you got to figure out your budget. And again, June 30th, 2022, maybe nonprofit budgets are either in process right now or have already been allocated. So you might have to go and do a reforecast or refactoring of the budget. All right, so you need to have a committee. And we think that's not only to help you select the best solution, but it's a critical piece of it. But going back to the people and the change, if you have a committee and people have input and they're heard and their needs are heard and discussed and considered, then that creates buy-in from those departments and those people. All right, then you got to evaluate your options. You got to look at the other software. You got to choose a partner if you need one. And then the easy part or the hard part is making the decision. So hopefully if you've had a diligent process, your decision will feel joyful and easy. And then once you've done it, let's get moving. June 30th is coming up, June 30th, 2022. All right, so we have talked a lot about process and people and considerations. Perhaps you came to this webinar hoping to hear about specific alternatives. And what we are going to give you in these slides as a leave behind that you'll get since you attended this webinar is a list of where to start looking. So this list is a variety of tools. So Firefly is the tool guide from Firefly is a great place to start when you're looking for digital tools. I have it on good authority. There's going to be an update in June. So if you sign up for it now, then you'll receive the update when it comes out next month. So June 2021, that is. Also, Cathexis Partners has done an evaluation of peer-to-peer fundraising technology. They do one that's sort of landscape and then one also that specifically integrates with Salesforce. So you can check those out if you know what your path is. N10 has a guide out to low-cost donor management systems. It's very comprehensive. Build Consulting has one that's more geared towards mid-size nonprofit CRMs. So we've got low cost, perhaps small, and then mid-sized. One footnote that I will say here is that you may not find some of the larger CRMs in either of these guides. And just know that they're out there. If you have a particularly complex direct mail program, for example, or if you are you have some other complicated enterprise structure that you don't think either of these solution sizes would serve, there are other solutions out there that aren't reviewed in these guides, but you can get a lot of information from the companies that make them. So finally, the last resource we're going to point you to is if you're a shopper like me and lots of other people, you probably read reviews of products you're considering purchasing if the websites make them available. So that very thing exists for software systems as well. It's a company called TrustRadius. They review all kinds of software, and they have a subsection of their website reviews that focus on systems for nonprofits. And these are useful reviews if you want to hear from people who have actually used the solutions. I won't say it's comprehensive because, again, not every solution has been reviewed by someone. But something that I like about recommending TrustRadius is that this company was founded by the founder of Convio, Vinay Bhagat. So when he moved on from Convio, his next company was TrustRadius because he thought that this could help other people make their buying decisions in a more informed manner. And that is the end of our resources. It is not comprehensive, but there's a lot there that will help you get started on the right track.
All right. Well, thank you, Sally and Watt, for all that really useful information. So we've got about 6 minutes left for question and answer, and we do have one question. I'll just put it out there. So can you talk more about data conversion migration, especially including that cost in your budget? I don't know if anybody wants to take that.
Well, I will say, I'll say a brief, nugget of wisdom or at least information about data conversion and migration. And then I will also glance at Watt for his input. You may have heard the term garbage in, garbage out. And if that is something that sounds familiar, it just means that if your data is not in clean or good shape, when it comes out of your system and goes into a new one, then it will remain not in good shape. And so data conversion and migration, it falls to me under the principle of you can have, of these three things, good, fast, and cheap, you can have two of them. So you will need to engage in a very diligent process of data conversion and cleaning up your data. And even if your data is in great shape and you don't have a lot of duplicates, you will need to spend time translating how it lived in Luminate CRM and how it will live in your new system. So even if you've got like the cleanest data around, you're still going to need to invest time, money, or both to make sure that it gets into your new system in the way that you want it to, and so you can use it. So as far as specifics, I think it's something that is worth paying for. If it is something, that feels out of reach of the budget of your organization, then you may want to evaluate whether you have the capacity and skills to take any of it on in-house. But generally, we also recommend let the experts do what they do, and handling data for hygiene and cleanup, is one of those things that, is worth paying for. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll just add, if you're planning to stay in Salesforce, as I mentioned, you are still going to basically go through a re-implementation. The one benefit is that the data model between what you use in LCRM and what you would use in NPSP or one of the other paid options share a lot in common. So at least you're starting from a place where there's data in an accounts table that needs to go to an accounts table, and a contact table that needs to go to a contact table. But beyond that, it really is still an exercise of determining field by field what's in the old system, what's in the new system, creating any transformations that are necessary, doing test runs of it to verify that, that the data is coming across correctly. And so there's no shortcutting that process, whether you stay on Salesforce or go elsewhere. The other thing to mention is, this is a great opportunity to clean your data. So if you've been living with that legacy of like, we got a lot of garbage in, as Sally said, this can be a good time to do that, and also a good chance to think about how much historical data you want to retain. Do you really need 20 years worth of email opens, in your new system? So this is a good chance. Not only are you going to have to do it because you've got to get off Luminate CRM, but there can be some benefits to your organization as well by sort of being forced to do this.
Do you want to know something like a piece of wisdom that I actually heard from Vinay Bhagat, founder of Convio, was we should only track data that we're going to use. And if we're not using it, let's not track it or ask for it. So like Watt said, if you have to move anyway, and you find that there's a lot of data that you have that you're not using anymore, maybe somebody used it at one time, there's no need to be like a magpie and retain it in your production database. If you want a historical copy, you can store that somewhere.
Great question. Thank you. Are there any more questions, Charlotte?
No. How long does the ideal recommended project timeline take to go from LCRM into a new system?
So I'll start. I'll kind of give you my perspective on that one. It really depends on the size of your organization and the extent of the things that you're doing inside of Salesforce and potentially Luminate Online. For large organizations, you should assume easily a year, and it seems like it couldn't possibly take that long, but it does. Sometimes it takes longer than that. And so, but it can take less. It can take less. The thing you also have to factor in is not just sort of how much time it takes to actually do the things to move you. It's what else is going on in your organization at that same time, right? Summer's coming. People have been vaccinated. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be taking time off this summer. And then, especially with fundraising, once we get into October, we're really in an intense time with your fundraising system. So it's not a great time to think about moving. So, those are a couple of things that you have to keep your eyes open about. And just assume it's going to take longer than you think, and assume you already don't have enough time. Again, we don't want to freak anybody out, but we really do want to convey that it is urgent.
The ideal timeline is one that gets you live before June 30th, 2022.
All right, well, we are over time. Thank you everyone for joining. We will send out the link to the recording as well as the slides, and you can, if you want to get in touch with us directly, there's our contact information on the screen.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you
Sally.
all.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.